Well, here I am waiting for Sovereign. So, as before, when you go live, things don't always work out as you want them. So, Sovereign is on his way, telling me that he is going to be less than 10 minutes. But I just wanted to share with all of you because there are some of you that have been waiting for this podcast, and he is on his way. Um, he was all ready to come on, and they started drilling next to his house. And if you've ever been anywhere where they're doing drilling in Asia, it's very loud. Well, it's very loud anywhere. So he's on his way to a venue where there is a little bit more quietness. So, welcome to this live podcast, and so I thought, well, look, rather than making you think that we actually aren't going to be doing this at all, I shall begin on this topic, um, and it's this word consciousness that we talk about so often, and what does it mean? I mean, it has a lot of meaning for different people, and so we are going to be looking into it. And I was doing some research this morning, and then I realized that the word consciousness originally was all about mental activity. You know, and the thought about it was that it was the brain. Um, but we're learning so much more about that. So, what is it for us now? What does consciousness mean? Well, for me, what it means is actually not so much about my five senses, but it means that it is far more about all those extrasensory perceptions that we have. The feelings that we have, the feelings of energy shifts, of sensations that are beyond explanation in the intellect. So that is what we are going to be exploring today. And I would love for you all to comment when you do listen to this, whether it is, when we're doing the podcast live as we are, or later when you have time to watch it. What does consciousness mean to you? Because I write about it all the time. I'm always saying we need to lift our consciousness, we need to become more consciously aware. But what does it mean for you? What does that say? We use so much language robotically in a way, and then we just kind of don't know what to do with it because it's a word, and does it actually resonate into anything other than a word? So consciousness, not a word that was ever in my vocabulary, before I started this journey. Now it's every second word I use. So let's look at the brain. For the brain to be consciously engaged, it's a mental activity. It's an analytical activity. It is a way to perceive the physical world, I believe. For me, certainly that has been the case where, have this belief, if you can't see it, it's not there. And if you don't, if you can't touch it, it's not there. And if you can't smell it, it's not there. So all of our five senses are engaged in the mental interpretation of the word conscious, being conscious of the physical world, which is then interpreted through those five senses. And that is great. I mean, it's very necessary. We need to navigate our world through those five senses. And if we don't see it and we don't touch it and we don't smell it and all of that stuff, then we're really getting a very limited experience of the physical life. But now our souls are calling that there's so much more. There's so much more for us to be able to experience beyond those five senses. And really that's the consciousness that I want to talk about today. So as I'm doing a solo here, which I wasn't prepared to do, but I also didn't want to leave it any longer, um, then I would like to describe, I guess, what the difference is for me, going beyond the five senses to the level of consciousness that I now find myself in most of the time. And that is an awareness of energetic movement. So, what does that mean? It means that I have come to this realization that everything is energy, and how I interact with it depends on my level of energy, and then it also depends on the energy of that which I'm interacting with. And we all know that that happens all the time, but we don't recognize it or identify it because most of the time we are so engaged with the consciousness of the mental consciousness of the five senses and the relationship with the physical life that we miss out on those subtle levels of consciousness of, if you walk into a room, you either feel like, oh, this is a beautiful place to be in. You relax, your body starts to just relax for you. And this is a nice place to be. Or you walk into a room and there's something not right. You just, yeah, no, you can't find a place which feels good, and you wish you hadn't come. Well, that's that subtle consciousness beyond the five senses that is telling you whether you are in a place that is uplifting for you or it is constricting for you. And that's the type of consciousness we're now learning to use far more as we go about our lives. That is the type of consciousness that is going to take us into this experience of being new Earth humans, because we will be interrelating with our world through those higher senses that are beyond the five senses. We will be doing far more intuitive work. We will certainly be doing far more telepathic connections, and we're already starting to do that. You think of something, and I just had it a moment ago. I was expecting someone to call today, and I had no way of contacting her to tell her not to come while I'm doing a live podcast. Well, I just said to the powers that be, or to the level of consciousness that lived, make sure she doesn't come. She either comes before or she comes after. Well, at quarter to 11, I don't know what time it is. Yeah, there she turned up. And I went, thank you. So telepathically, I sent her a message going, make sure you come before or after. What suited her was before. And these are the way that, that is where consciousness is an energy factor that we can utilize. And the more we practice that, the better we get at it. So that level of consciousness is that we have to acknowledge more. So the more that you notice it, the more prevalent it becomes in your awareness, because the word consciousness to me is awareness. It's a sense of awareness of what is, not just in the physical, but beyond the physical. It's a bit like growing antenna, and having them out there and sensing. So becoming much more of a sentient being, which we are, but more of a conscious sentient being. In other words, we are actually uh, engaged in a sense of awareness, of being present consciously. And that gives us a much more expansive experience of life. So, where does that take us, and how is that beneficial for us? Because that is really what this is all about. How is that beneficial for us? Well, the way that it's beneficial for us is that we become much more connected to nature. We're much more connected to the nature of self. We become more able to make discerning decisions, not from an intellectual, analytical place, but from a place of sensitivity. So, being really consciously aware means that you are super sensitive. And there are many, many people out there that are now so sensitive that they're finding the physical life really difficult. And so they have to learn to navigate both. And most of us are in that state where we need to navigate both. We need to navigate the physical world that is still going through all sorts of things, and we need to navigate our own, our level of consciousness. Well, I think that we've actually just about got our wonderful sovereign turning up. So let's just see that add him. Hello. So you got here. I did this start to start the podcast for people who actually were waiting for us. So I have been rambling on. Hi, Sov. How are you?
Yay. That was a bit of a last minute changeover, but here we are.
I know. Well, that's what lives do. And I know a lot of people don't do lives for that reason because they say, oh, yes. But, I think for me, the more real we are, the more real we are. So let's just go back a bit. I've been rambling on about what consciousness means to me, but I really want to find out how you've been and what's happening in Bali. And interestingly enough, the mandates have been lifted. We don't need any more documentations to get into Bali, which is fantastic.
It
Yeah.
is. It is totally
Mhm.
great. Yeah. I'm well. I'm well in my cells. I'm chopping wood, carrying water, also known as mixing cement, and active in construction with my Bali family that have some urgent changes that need to be made. So
Okay.
yeah, it's been good, but being out in the sun and doing that hard work makes me wonder how all these other humans are able to easily do that every day.
I know. I know. Yes. Well, it's until you walk in someone else's shoes that you start to really get a greater understanding of that situation.
That's right. Yeah. Let me just correct my little. Here we go. Nice.
So
Consciousness.
consciousness, I looked it up and I was reading about it, and then I got this message from my team saying, "No, don't worry about that. Let's just examine it." So I've rambled enough. I'm now handing over to you. What is consciousness meaning to you? It's a word we just use so often now.
Oh yeah. It's uh, it's a little bit greenwashed, I think.
Uh huh.
Just like the word sustainability has no meaning to it. Um, Consciousness seems to be this arbitrary word sound that is easily thrown around, and it comes it comes kind of part and parcel with the word frequency that I think is more accurately replacing it, because that's really what consciousness is. Everything. It's every living. It's the sentience that is the spirited nature of life that is imbued and active from the stones to the etheric realms. And when I first got acquainted with this word consciousness, it was through a book that I picked up in a place called the Netherlands. And really interesting, that word in Dutch, which is bewustzijn, is to be conscious. You're
This
muted.
morning I was asking what would that word be in Dutch, but yeah, absolutely. Okay. The best take.
So to be conscious is the word for consciousness, and it has, I guess, it's a combination of two words. While in the the little piece called ness is an indication that it's a state of being. Prettiness is maybe another one. Um, and so it is a state of being within oneself. And that has to do with presence. That has to do with how present are we in the moment. And I think that as humans of the Western mind, we've been conditioned to be operating in a lot of overuse of the intelligence, the little ramble box that always is producing thoughts and always is thinking about tomorrow or yesterday. And real presence is in the here and the now, only accessible. And that has almost like an absence of thoughts when we really drop in as humans. And I feel for me that having looked at the architecture of consciousness, which are just a bunch of human created concepts to try and figure out how to put into human language what all the tiers and all the layers and all the dimensional realities are made of, and how we can label those different dimensional frequencies so that we can have a sense of relating to it, which what people would maybe call an understanding. But I don't think an understanding of consciousness on an intellectual level really does much other than providing that ramble box a little bit more of things to think about and things to put in boxes. And I think that when we look at our own capacity to generate certain brain wave states in our own sense of being, and we can drop into delta, we can drop it, we're often in the more active frequencies, where with that operating in a different field or a different realm that we can tap into ourselves in consciousness, in a state of being. And I think it's in that stillness that we are able to elicit and discover from this silent voice within the information field that would like to translate and is available to us all the time, anything and everything that we may have a benefit accessing. But a lot of that has to do with the curiosity that we may have, or the questions that we may have that not necessarily come out of an intellectual field, but more a willingness to be open, to receive. And I feel that the Western mind is orientated to gain access by contemplation, and whether we call that deep meditation or deep exploration of concepts, I have noticed that if we really want to access higher states of consciousness, not that I believe that there's higher or lower in that sense, there are just different field frequencies that we can access. It's really about willing ourselves to become open to enter into that field, because that consciousness field is already there. It's not like you can get there, but you can, as a human being, open yourself up to it so that it may, by opening ourselves up, we do get access, but it comes into us and we attune ourselves with that field that is already there. And that for me has been a very indigenous related innerstanding, and not an understanding, but an innerstanding of the world that is actually available to us, that has so little to do with the man-made, constructed fabrication of reality that really is made up of a whole bunch of belief systems and a whole bunch of ideas about reality. And with that, we have really been born into a world that is very closed off from the much larger reality of what's really going on the earth, what's really available to us, and really what holds the answers. It's just that the lens through which we have been programmed to view reality, having been pretty much the only framework, then takes on the competitive, comparative structure where any expansion or anything that falls outside of that framework of the 3D reality is going to have to contest somehow with what we already know and what we've already been taught and what we've been programmed with. And it takes a lot to learn how to open up and let all that knowledge and all that intellectual property not have a voice that calls exceptional experiences beyond the current reality into question. And with that, we can actually become again like children, curious and open, and really step into a magical world where communication from the expanded field of beingness becomes something that we get a direct experience of. And those experiences can lead us into states of bliss. They can lead us into states of insight that may take months, even years to put into language. And I feel that the more we can recognize that the expanded state of beingness is the greater reality that we get to navigate as human beings, then we can diminish the value of the 3D reality that we've been taught to be the only reality as a significant space holder. And we can start sensing on a daily basis that there is not just more, but there is an availability within ourselves to have a deepened or a expanded experience of the world around us.
Mm. So beautiful. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you turned up, actually. I'm, I'm sitting here thinking about language as such. And, you know, what, what occurs is that as we are expanding as humans, which we are, that is the journey we're all on. Our soul is calling us to become more, to be more present, and to find out who we really are. I think this whole journey is about know thyself in its true sense. And so for me, what I've recognized, and we both share the same mother tongue, although yours is, still very much in the forefront, is where mine is pretty much in the background. However, we have these expanded experiences of sensation because we are sentient beings in a sentient universe. And then for the intellect to be able to engage with that, or we have to say it doesn't make sense. Well, the intellect has to make sense of it. So the words are created to attempt to describe the expanded experience that we have. And where consciousness is concerned, it's no different to what I would say soul used to be, the thing on the bottom of your shoe. But what's interesting is that as that transition occurred, where we started to focus more on the soul within, that word has become far more prevalent, and we almost never talk about the soles of our shoes, do we? That's gone into the background. So this is how this language then starts to expand in our level of intellect, in our intellectual consciousness, because there is a consciousness of the intellect, which is very much to do with the five senses, which I was talking about before you arrived. And that's a mental activity where we translate our physical life through our five senses. But we're going beyond that now, and we're finding out that actually true consciousness is just the pure energy of whatever it is, of existence. And so now we are using a word that the intellect hasn't become comfortable with yet. So it is a journey where we then get the inner standing of the expanded experience to then
Mhm.
marry with the word in the intellect, where it becomes a knowing rather than a seeking or a knowledge. And for me, that transformation has occurred. So for me, I live in a conscious state most of the time. And well, no, all of the time. Okay, I can never say anything that isn't true. All of the time, conscious of my physical world, but very conscious of the metaphysical world, that, that subtle world of energy. And that is so much about what I teach people, to feel their way into the world. I had a lovely experience with a young boy of 11 yesterday who was wanting to make a decision, a huge decision in his life. And I said to him, we, you already know the answer that you need.
Mm.
And I got him to do the simple kinesiology test of, if you think about one decision and your body goes back, it's a no, and if you think of it and it goes forward, it's a yes. Within us, we are sentient beings, and so as soon as I have a question, my body knows the answer. The problem is we've always gone to the head for the answer, and it's not where we find our truth. So to be consciously aware is an expanded experience of a universe, whatever you want to call it, a quantum field, I call it, of frequency or vibrational waves, however you want to translate that. You see, none of those words would sit comfortably in the intellect with what in the heart we know to be true. So the heart and the intellect don't seem to, they have to catch up with each other. And so this word consciousness, and I write about it all the time. And that's why I thought, well, are the people that are listening to us, and that, do they really know what we're talking about? Can they feel what we're talking about? Have they got the experience of that word yet? Because it's not something you go to the dictionary. I got the thesaurus out before to try and work, and I went, oh my Lord, I used to look in there all the time. Now I just went, no, it's this marrying up with the sensation in your body of something that is new and expansive. As you go, you say, it's a greater depth. It's like you said, you're still chopping wood and carrying water. So why go through all this work? Well, I often ask my, the students, I go, so, what's the difference? How are you feeling different now? And they go, I'm living my life with a greater depth. At a greater depth, you feel more, you experience more. As where, it's a bit like if you're having a wine tasting, and I don't do wine tastings, but I watch people that are really passionate about it, and the way that they sort of let this little bit of wine go around, and they talk about it comes from the left side of the hill up here and something else. I drink and I go, ooh, yuck, thanks. No, I have something else. I have no connection to that whatsoever. But as you say, if you're willing to have the experience, you open yourself up to that experience, then I just love watching people do that, because I think, how do they do that? Well, because they're sharpening their senses beyond, let's have a drink of wine. Their sensations are so sharpened. And we know that, if, for instance, someone who has lost their sight, all their other senses are heightened. And so for me, what consciousness is about, it's a heightening of awareness that goes beyond these five senses and gives us an expanded experience of everything. But to have that experience, you have to make a decision that you want it. You have to have an intention that that's how you now wish to experience life. So you need to look for it, you need to feel it. And the more you do that, the more it becomes yours as an everyday experience. And then all of a sudden, the intellectual expression or interpretation of the word and the heart knowing of the word suddenly merge. And that is that moment where you have the aha. And it's when you say it, every cell integrates with it.
Yeah, yeah, so beautiful. What I've noticed, reflecting more and more on the social conditioning and the programming, is that we as human beings are all taught how to think, which is really, well, I don't even know that we're taught how to think. I think we're mostly taught how to repeat stuff, or how to speak, so to speak.
So
We're
is
not
it more
necessarily,
about what we're taught what to think?
yeah, we're talking what to think. Yeah, not even how to think, but what to think. And
Yep.
that's an extra step removed on being shown how to feel, and how our human nature is not that we are thinking based creatures. It's a component of who we are, but intrinsically we are feeling based creatures. And when we are looking at accessing consciousness or tapping into an expanded field of what we may call reality, more subtle fields of energy, um, hyperdimensional realities that we all could and can navigate into. The prerequisite for that is to have a connection with our body that allows us to feel through that heart space, as you said, that heart knowing. And that's something that I feel requires re-enabling. And in order to re-enable that, we need to be willing to train ourselves to prioritize feeling and sensing ourselves and sensing our intuition and sensing our subtle perceptive, um, measuring of environmental differences in the frequency of what's around us, being willing to be attuned to and be open to be aware of communication that may be coming to us through, well, from my own upbringing. At the age of 33, I started learning that all of nature is communicating and is spirited. And the cloud people are communicating, the tree people are communicating, the entire mineral kingdom is here to really assist us. And when we look at the word consciousness and what it means on a kind of etymological level, it's to know with, and there is a sharing of knowledge, to be in shared knowledge, in the roots of the word in Latin. And why I bring that up is that if you and I had never been exposed to anything outside of the 3D reality, because we just all stayed in the box, um, we would not necessarily be able to access, um, things outside of our reality, because we don't know that it's there, so we don't have any curiosity that it's there, and so we're not going to follow anything, because we may have a little impulse coming from within, like, this is not the complete reality that I feel is the complete reality, because this feels like a programmed matrix. But if we're so contained within that construct of social conditioning, we may not lean out of that. And this is where consciousness really in the human ecological sense is an act of together gaining access and assisting others to gain more access within themselves, because you are consciousness, I am consciousness, but the field frequency that I have tapped into, when other people come and spend time with me and they are in my field, they get access to a whole different way of relating to reality. They get access to a far expanded way of even speaking to what is available in the experience. And this is where I think that in our human ecological makeup, we really need each other to elevate each other into the expanded realms of presence and the expanded realms of having a deepened and a widened experience of what it means to be human. And I feel that we've been very much curtailed for the benefit of enterprise to have a very limited sense of what is actually available to us. And once we have that first crack in the dam, once that first bit of, whether it's an outer body experience or it's a tremendously profound dream, or we have a daydream, or there's something that breaks into our reality that then awakens our spirited nature, that already is part of that field. But all this programming has reduced our orientation to a very small bandwidth of attention and focus. And so when we seek out others that have explored or have access within themselves, have already developed that, and we connect with those humans, we ourselves, by virtue of our own willingness to not put them through our question session of like, well, I wonder if it's all true, and all that skepticism needs to be put aside. There needs to be a willingness to connect. And what we can do is we can very easily access the quote unquote higher states of consciousness by being in the presence of other human beings. And this is witnessable, and millions of testimonies are around for those that identify themselves as gurus that are attuned to these higher fields of frequencies, like the she called Amma. Humans come into her field and they just get blown away. And it's because in the presence of others that have deepened their relationship, their direct interaction, but really their spaciousship, how spaciously they have expanded themselves, in how they have reduced the lens of the mind to a lesser focal point to identify reality with, and they have opened themselves up, and then they become translators of that field. And that's what I think that in human consciousness really is the tying, interlinked and interconnectedness, is that we can get access to expanded layers and levels of our, our personal available experience here on the earth by tuning in with those people that are the way showers, are the space holders, are the frequency emanators. And I see in that we can only find people that, well, we can find many people, but the people that have stepped into that for themselves are not necessarily way showers per se. They are re-enabled in themselves to reconnect from within to the expanded field, and they become a transmission opportunity for others to lean into and to gain access in that way. And in there I see that we can be guides and guidance for each other, to support each other, to see beyond the limitations of the 3D world.
Never truer words have been spoken. And what really came up for me as I was listening to you is how we are programmed, in the schooling system as it is designed, um, for separation. Children are drawn to each other naturally, but the sooner the sooner they get into these institutional places, there's always this competition, and one has to be better than the other, and none is not as good as the other. And so, what happens with that is that it takes away the innate consciousness of connection. So we are learning and have learned to reconnect with that, and to reintroduce and integrate that into our everyday life. But one of the things that's come up here in Victoria at the moment, Australia, I don't really engage in the 3D world, but in the schooling system now, there is no touch policies. Children are not allowed to touch each other. They're not allowed. There is, so there's no touch this. Um, what is that telling me? That is telling me that whoever is making the rules is so frightened of this raising of consciousness that is you and I that are promoting, that we are bringing people back to realizing who they are, what they are, that they are nature in human form, that they are part of this quantum field of divine frequency, whatever our intellect tries to make words of. And what we do with our younglings is we tell them that they are not good enough. That the other person is not touchable. Excuse me. I'm even choking on that. It is so far away from who we are and where we're going. It is with criminal intent, I believe, and I don't use those words very often. But
Mm.
for me, it is like, what kind of a world are we allowing? And that's what this is all about. When we tune into our natural level of consciousness, we know in here that that is bizarre. That is completely against every cell in our humanness body. It is destroying humanness. And we need to stand up. And that's why you and I are doing what we're doing. Still not a subject that's very good for me, obviously. If you take that away,
Right. Yeah. It's I see this human being with this beautiful field of energy. Whether we call that the auric field or the field that humans are actually wired to have inner communication with. And then we place a human inside of a cage called the education system, where most of all of that energy and that interconnectedness with a wider web of life is not, there's a parameter around it. And when we institutionalized the education system way back through the Rockefellers wanting to create a workforce, we created a really artificial structure that was very logically just geared to have very focused outcomes that would be like programmed humans to be a workforce, and teach them the information that is relevant to them being good worker bees, so to speak. Well, that cage has been around for well over 100 years. And in that unnatural environment, of course, the natural human being is going to, yeah, it's going to revolt at some level. The real question here is, and this is the kind of premise of this 3D cage that we are having all around us, is that we are taught that all of that is normal. But when we start asking ourselves, is that natural? Then we will find that the majority of interactions, engagements, structures, forms, are all coping mechanisms based on what to maintain the norm, and they don't serve anything in the human ecology on the deeper level of what it means to be a human. But since that construct had been created, we are just finding more and more reasons to create more and more bylaws and more rules, because the whole approach there is that one kid bashes another kid, and then maybe it happens again because they're in an unnatural environment, and so they make up this new rule where, well, we got to keep the cage together. We can't not have our school the way that it is, because we need to maintain our jobs. We need to, whatever the need, the perceived need of nonsense there is. And so then new rules are being brought in to just make it even more unnatural. And it just is going to get to greater unnatural states, really to push parents ultimately to realize that they're not raising younglings. They're deducating children, they're disconnecting children, they are setting children up for failure later in life, to maybe climb a ladder that you know the parents themselves aspire to. But those ladders are all empty dreams at the end of it, when you really look into what does it constitute to be a human being, and an ensouled, spirited part of creation. And if our soul is here for growth and development, then putting them in cages is going to give them a very, very small, perhaps a unique experience. Like if Earth is a school and you go to the education system in Australia for 20 years of your life, well, then your soul would have learned how ridiculous it is to be curtailed. Great. There's very little learning in that, because the consciousness within the human isn't actually expanding. It is actually learning how to live unconsciously with repression, oppression, and diminishing and devaluing and disconnection. But if connection isn't taught, if valuing isn't taught, if sovereignty of self isn't taught, if willingness and with that consensual engagement with other humans, and if feeling-based relating isn't taught, then we are really just training the younger generation to operate only in the intelligence, because the cells of any human being, particularly younglings, they can relate to feelings. They can't relate to intelligent, this is right, that is wrong. Why is it right? Why is it wrong? But if we share with somebody else that, or with a youngling that has got some behavior that may not be too conducive to another youngling, by means of being aggressive, if we have feeling-based relating around that, we are training the quote-unquote abusive youngling to tap into its own empathy, and really to tap into its own feeling. Because why is it being abusive in the first place? Well, because there are other unnatural elements in its ecology that are playing out. And mostly that's the grown-ups that are not doing it natural. And so when we look at consciousness and what we see in the Western world having been rolled out is a degeneration, a degradation, and really an erosion of the intrinsic and natural inborn capacities and abilities of humans to feel, and through feeling be able to have that sense of empathy and connection with other human beings. And in that arises then the spirited nature of our desire to operate in togetherness and collaboration and co-creation, because that feels nice. It feels nice to play. It feels nice to make things together. And it feels nice to not be the winner. And it feels actually nice to not be the owner of the sandcastle that was made. But it feels nice to be in awe of what we were able to accomplish together. And so schools, Earth, the whole hijacked human narrative is not about what we can accomplish together. It's definitely a world of trained competitive orientations that are being bred in very early on. And yeah, that by default, because of the causal reality of life here on the earth, and for us as humans, the causal reality of that is if you grow up in a disconnection matrix, you're not going to have that access to the expanded field of consciousness. But when we do that again, and when we tap into that again, we come back into the syntropy with life. We come back into the syntropy in our human relationships. We want to spend time with each other and accomplish things together, whether they are great big achievement goals of things we want to build or things we want to create. What mostly we are attracted to do in the process is to spend time together because it feels nice. And I encourage anyone to start spending time with people that are doing things that feel attractive to them. And yeah, each and every individual will have to battle with their own intellectual programmed hovercraft that hovers over everything and tries to say, well, does this make sense? Does this make sense? Here's one solution to that little rambling box. It's not supposed to make sense. It's supposed to feel good.
Absolutely, absolutely. I love that. You know, consciousness can only be experienced in its pure essence in the present moment. For me, that is really where this all comes back to. That in the present moment, we can tune into ourselves, we can tune into our environment, we can tune into each other. But that takes a willingness and an intention to connect. How often do we have a conversation with people where we can't wait for that other person to stop talking so that it's our turn and we can have our say? You know, and that is such a programmed thing. So to bring us back, when if we could, you know, just keep our younglings from acknowledging, as you said, if one feels aggressive, that has a reason. There is something in their cells that is not comfortable. So when you can, you know, you can um, really ask them, what is it that you're feeling? What would you like? Nobody ever asks another person, what is happening for you? We're always so busy telling everybody what's happening for ourselves, or what is supposed to be happening, or you should, and you must, and you have to. And for me, it is the more that I bring my consciousness to this very moment, I can, you know, sense exactly who you are. You know, I'm so often asked by people, how do you know this about me? And I go, because it's what you radiate. You radiate an energy that I tune into. I hear your mouth going up and down, and it's not that I'm not actually listening to you, I'm hearing your words, but they're secondary to what your heart's telling me. So that is what I believe real conscious awareness is about, is to be in this present moment, expanding your intention of what your awareness is to bring to you. You know, if I'm only wanting to know this much, then this much is all that I'm going to get. But when I make my intention every morning that I want expansion of experience, and then I spend my whole day still intellectualizing everything, I've missed it. But when I really mean what I say and I go, I connect to source, and I wish to, at the end of my life, I wish to feel that I have, you know, delved deeply into the experience of conscious connection to myself, to the earth, to people, and to Sovereign, who obviously has just, his internet has just dropped out. But, you know, that is really what this is all about. It is this awareness of what is my intention here? how consciously aware can I live this life in this present moment? That was an interesting conscious dropout song in that moment.
All right.
And but
Got
it is, again,
disconnected.
it's that awareness, of how interested am I in you when I connect with you? Or am
Mm,
I busy worrying about what I'm going to have for dinner or what I did yesterday to whoever what? And how present am I with you in any given moment? And I believe one of the reasons that you and I have found such an amazing connection over these last 3 years is because we're so tuned into each other's energy.
mm,
And your energy enlivens me. And my energy must do something for you because you're still here. It is like, what can we offer each other
mm.
energetically? Not so much, what can I do for you? When we move the doing to the energetic expression of self, know that giving from ourselves and ourselves to each other, that is conscious connection.
Yeah.
And when we learn to do that, we don't harm each other. We haven't got the energy to harm each other because our
Mm,
true humanness, when we look at our younglings when they're born, they're full of joy. They're full of awe of life. And
yeah.
it just all gets compressed and, as you say, put into a box. And so, as our passion is about creating an earth where we offer this expansion of consciousness from
Mm,
the get-go, where we nurture the innate encoded gifts that we carry within us when we come, instead of shoving a whole lot of unnecessary rubbish into the intellect that we then require to live out. I'm always thinking, how many times when I was a youngling, a long time ago, was I asked, know, when did Columbus discover America? I can't tell you how much use that's been in my life. I couldn't have lived this life without having that knowledge. But whether I was going up a grade or down a grade relied on that correct answer. And it's futile. So, for me to bring this identification with the word consciousness and the integration of that in my every cell and in my awareness
mm,
comes back to being completely present with life itself
yeah.
in every moment
Yeah.
of interaction.
And it's so much grander and so much greater and so much more. There's so much more beauty to behold and be witness of and be in direct relating with when we are willing to open up and really be in a asking for it to come into us.
Mm.
We can't go out there. It's already there. It's already available right within. And it's really about being willing and being hungry. And if humans aren't hungry for this, well, their conditioning is so severe and so strong. But everybody in their life gets a rude awakening, gets a, the universe just gives you that call to adventure to look beyond the limited scope of reality, whether it's through a car accident or there's something that will jolt us to start questioning. And I think that the function that the controlling forces that have sought to diminish the perceptive ability of humanity as a whole in relationship to the expanded nature of what we're actually all here for together, um, to glorify creation and to build something that is a testament to creation, with the architecture of creation in the architecture of our own buildings, in our temples. In that has really gone to the wayside, and that has to do with that hijacking of human consciousness. Putting a meter on electricity was one of the major factors. We had that access to free energy being able to be transmitted through the ethers. But Mr. Maxwell said, well, I can't put a meter on that. And so these forces of greed-driven, control-driven, power-hungry souls have really laid a huge burden, but really a huge constriction and a huge limitation through all the infrastructural organizations and institutions, from any arm or leg or branch of government. And that's something that we benefit recognizing. And even though we then grew up with it as normal, we can simply start asking, but is it natural? And if it's not natural, then why would I be participating in that if I'm able to make choices based on what really is in alignment with myself and what is in alignment with the program? Like, do you want to operate in a programmed space, or do you want to have access to more? And that in itself is a hero's journey to step into. But the good thing is that there's many people that are already on that path. And because the human spirit is driven to support each other, to encourage each other, to reach out a hand, nobody's ever alone on this journey.
No, and you just used the word more, and that's what it's about, isn't it? It's that really saying there's got to be more. There's got to. I didn't incarnate here to just pay somebody for that little crumb that I'm being given. There's got to be more, and as you say, it's this innate curiosity that is, if that's alive in you, then you keep looking for more. And of course, the more you look for more, then when you find more, that just opens doors to more. And there is no end to that, right? And that makes life so fulfilling. And I love that word. It fills you full. We spend so much of our life in places where we feel unfulfilled, where we don't feel full. Every moment of my life, I want to feel full. And of course, at my stage of life, I have no idea how much longer that's going to be. So it is wonderful because every moment of my life, I want to complete by going, well, that was a fulfilling moment, right? Like being with you is fulfilling moment. And after this, I'm going to have lunch with a dear friend, and that will be, fulfilling moment. I now don't shortchange myself anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I don't shortchange myself for the benefit of someone else. Whatever I'm engaged in, and that is what we've really got to come home to. Whatever we're engaged with and in, is it filling you full? Not here, that's overloaded already. But in here, does it make your heart sing? Do you feel expanded of that moment? In that moment, it's so powerful when you live like that. But we're never taught it, and unfortunately, we are so programmed that if we aren't taught it, we don't look for it, unless, as you say, all of a sudden, soul says, "Enough of this rubbish," bang. And hey, all of us have gone through the dark night of the soul, right, to know that little story. And so, you either then wake up and smell the roses and choose to have a conscious life or not. And so, what I'm really excited about is that more and more beings are coming to that level of understanding of there's got to be more. This is not how I want to live my life, and it's not what I want to teach my children, and it's not what is filling me full.
That's right. And what we get to do in the process of us being us, you being you, me being me, really everybody being themselves, but those that have, like, I've been having some regular visitors coming to my place here in Bali, and they feel it.
Mm-hmm.
And what every single one of them has said is like, wow, this is possible.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we are able to show each other, that more is possible, more is available by living and being that. And then the cells of the individual that witnesses the frequency of more but can't put language to that will sense and feel like, I want to spend more time with this person. I want to get what they're getting. And that's something that then comes from within the cells. And I feel that our natural role in human ecology, as we each follow our own journey to more fulfillment and a richer experience of the fullness of what's available to us as human beings, is that as we be that, others get to feel that that's possible, and then their cells will become curious. And so what I sense in that, sometimes the universe kind of like uproots us in the sound of it. There's no universe uprooting any of us, but there are experiences that come into our reality that totally make everything just fall apart. When we surround ourselves, or when we seek out humans that are operating in a frequency that is natural and expanded, the cells of that individual coming into close proximity with them and listening to their own curiosity will get themselves onto a path that is a gentle one. Because we don't all need to wait for the universe to upend us.
No.
We need to follow ourselves. We need to follow the intuitive, intrinsic, innate knowing of what feels good. And so for me, consciousness is really about a feeling based state of returning to, not getting to, but returning to, in order to be able to, quote unquote, tap into all the other stuff that is available to us. And I call it stuff because it's beautiful and there's so much of it. It's abundant.
It is abundant and it's infinite and expansive, you know. And I can so relate to people coming to visit your little heavenly place, and feeling the energy because it is beautiful. And just get ready because we're coming again in November. I'm very excited to be returning and playing. We can play again. Um, and it is making that choice, isn't it? That what kind of a life at the end of my day, looking back, how well did I use the gift of life, and how consciously did I make my discerning decisions? You know, and so many people don't. They make decisions from the perspective of what they should do, how other people view it, you know, other people's advice, and it's, look, we know we have this knowing inside of us, and when we're consciously aware of that and we follow that, life becomes beautiful,
Mm.
beautiful. Thank you once more for this excitement, and it's been a bit of a, you know, given, and I don't mind. You know, life is like that. Sometimes it's exactly what you want, and then when it doesn't want to play, well, you just go with it. So again, you know, I often ask myself, how did you and I come together, and what a blessing, and it just, and you know, that is what I love about when you tune into the willingness of what's available to you, and you open up to that without the intellect getting involved. So once more, we have played, and I'm really, looking. I know quite a few of my community are always looking forward to seeing your beautiful face on screen, and for us to have a little discussion about things. So we shall do it again whenever consciousness tells us to.
Nice. And for those dropping in at the end of this, it's not supposed to make sense. It's supposed to feel good.
Absolutely. I love that. Don't make sense of it. Just feel good about it. Love you dearly. Thank you so much for being in my life.
Yay. Likewise, Yvonne. Such a
Fulfilling it.
delightful experience always.
And until next time, keep consciously expanding.
Nice.